Margaret Nuzzolese hails from New York and is a 2006 graduate of Boston College. Junior year, she went on a trip to El Salvador and felt the need to respond to that experience. She later joined the Jesuit Volunteer Corps and spent 2 years in Nicaragua. Margaret came back to work at the Heights as assistant director at the Center for Student Formation for a couple of years and was recently named the director of Campus Ministries' Arupe program. It has been a long and winding road, and we look forward to hearing her story this evening. Now we welcome Margaret.
Thank you so much for being here. This is really an honor. It's overwhelming. I feel incredibly blessed. And I want to thank Karen Kiefer and the whole Agape Latte team for everything you did to put this on, especially for John Walsh, you putting me in the Shake It Off video. It was a pleasure to star for 2 seconds in the viral BC film. Really a highlight of my film career, I have to say. But really, thank you. When I was thinking about the opportunity to speak here in front of you and with Agape Latte, I was watching reruns. Do you know that these Agape Lattes are on the front page of C21's website? So I'm watching the reruns and staring at this backdrop here that's behind every other speaker that has shared their story. And it was really impactful for me to notice that because I was a student here when the church abuse crisis broke out right across the way. And I was a freshman, and I remember very much being on upper campus and hearing the news and trying to figure out as a person of faith, what did it mean to still be a Catholic? And I remember being so proud of Boston College when it was announced that BC was going to found an initiative, the C21 initiative, that eventually turned into a center to respond to some of the wounds, to have conversations and panels and thoughts and stories and feelings that would help to heal and to really renew and transform our church. And here it is, what, 10-ish something years later. All of you here, there's events all of the time. And while we still have so much healing to go and still so much conversation still to have, I think that this is really an incredible, incredible thing that we do here at BC. So a little bit about my journey. When I was thinking about my journey of faith, I thought about the 3 words, blessed, broken, and shared, which were in the clouds of that sweet picture of me in that cool car, which I'll never have. The blessed, broken, and shared comes from Jesus and the Last Supper and the words that are said at Catholic Mass when we do the communion rite. And the priest says, Jesus took the bread, blessed it, broke it, and shared it with his disciples. And he said, do this in memory of me. And I've often sat and wondered, do what? What is the do this? Even going through Catholic school my whole life, that do what, that call to mission has been perplexing to me. And when I think about the key points in my life where I've had to make pivotal decisions, the feelings of blessedness, brokenness, and being shared have been those which have most prominently come up. So hopefully many of you have been on halftime and you've heard the 3 key questions: what brings you joy, what am I good at, who does the world need me to be? And you all gone through convocation, so you know the 3 B's of Jesuit education, right? Be attentive, be reflective, and be loving. And this other set of 3, blessed, broken, and shared, is a 3 which I hope to kind of carry in my life as a Christian disciple. So first, a little bit more background about myself. I'm from Long Island, New York. Anyone else? Woo! Every speaker that says that asks for the woo for where they're from. I love that. All right, so I'm from Long Island, New York. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings, or 4 children, 2 sisters and a brother. I have 2 wonderful parents, and we were raised in Port Washington in a very Catholic environment. When I say very Catholic, we're the family that went to the very first Mass that was offered on Ash Wednesday, so we could be the first people to walk around town with the ashes, the first people in school with the mark. And people would ask, how do you already have them? Well, we went to a 6 a.m. Mass with the nuns. And my parents instilled an incredible faith in me that when I think about what that means, it meant that faith was more important than anything, absolutely anything. I remember conversations with my mom saying, anything? Like it's more important than family, but family is where we have faith. And she would say, well, what if you don't have family? And what if family's not behind you? I hope that if we're all gone, that you have faith, and that's what you carry through. So that always stuck with me. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. I absolutely loved it. It was an incredible opportunity to grow in faith and academics and to prepare me to come to a place like Boston College, which I very much wanted to do. I was the president of clubs and everything, like many of you, student council, sports, the whole 9 yards that you have to do to get here. And when I got into Boston College, I was psyched. I felt like I had won the lottery. I felt like I was going to die before I graduated because it couldn't get any better. And I wanted to do at college exactly what I had done in high school. I wanted to be the head of every club and the president of UGBC, and I wanted to play a varsity sport also. That didn't work out. You know, I very much was repeating the patterns of trying to be kind of a leader and a woman of faith and action and service and all those great things. And so I got on the path and I tried to do all those things. I signed up for Appalachia and I applied for UGBC and I tried out for the swim team, which I didn't make. And I made friends, I think, pretty quickly. It wasn't all perfect right off the bat. I want you to know I had some rough semesters. But for the most part, I think, started off with a pretty cookie-cutter BC experience. I was high on life and loving it and felt so blessed to be here. Arupe 10 years ago, I think, was in a slightly different form than it is now. It wasn't quite as known to people as the Arupe program. And it was sort of one of these things that like really, really intense people do. And really, really intense people still do it. But it was like, I felt like it was a thing for other people. And I had a friend sophomore year that I met through having been an orientation leader. And she had told me about her experience on Arupe. She had gone to El Salvador and how powerful that was for her faith. She told me about the martyr, Oscar Romero, and how she had gone to his grave and his tombstone and everything like that, and how important the reality was to learn about El Salvador. And I was really struck by that. I kind of like saw this glimmer in her eye when she would talk about it, and I wanted to learn more. And so I applied to the program. And I didn't get it my first time around. I applied as a sophomore. I remember very, very clearly sitting in Dan Ponsetto's office, and he was the person interviewing me. And I remember him saying, you wrote in your application you have a strong faith. What does that mean? And I remember thinking, gosh, what does that mean? Like, I've known it my whole life, but why is he even questioning what it means to have a strong faith? It isn't until kind of looking back and then having gone on it that I've come to a little bit more terms with it. But so didn't get in the first time, got in the second time around. It was my junior year. And I think junior year was this time of blessedness, the first chunk of my story. Junior year for me was a year of great changes. It was living off campus, like abroad. I didn't go abroad, especially in this snow. I was living abroad on South Street, and my friends were abroad. And at this point, I had done what I felt like I had done like every club that I could have dreamed of up until this point. And I really wanted to try new things. So I felt very, very lucky that I had gotten into this Arupe program. And I knew that I wanted to challenge myself. I knew that there had to be more than kind of just like following this path of BC esteem. And so the Arupe experience was really kind of a good opportunity. And I'm going through it, and we're meeting through the sophomore year, or the first semester, and I felt comfortable with the community and open sharing. I didn't feel like we were like the best of friends or anything like that right away. But I went through it and was kind of open to this experience because people said it was transformative. I went, I remember the night before the trip. I had never left the country, and I was, again, trying to do everything right to prepare for the experience. I went to Target to get these like white V-neck shirts that everyone says that like when you go to these countries you have to wear white V-neck shirts because they'll support the sweat, and you can wear a skirt with it and it just kind of like works for the outfit. So I got these shirts, and I was kind of obsessed with like everything I was going to bring to the country, not having been out and to a country like I hadn't left the country at all. And certainly it was an important experience, I think, going to a community that was more marginalized than what I had experienced before. And we get on the plane, we get to El Salvador. It's sort of like a whole new world, right? Because everything's in Spanish. Migración, we enter, and all the bags are coming out, and I'm the last person to not get my bag. Did not show up in this country after all kind of the prep that I had done to get all those things together. And we talk with the people in country, and they tell me that the bag is lost. It's in Ireland, and it is not getting to El Salvador anytime soon. So immediately, this is like first, you know, signal number one, like Arupe is going to be transformative because I have no clothes. I have to go through this whole week without anything. But it was important right away to kind of be open and kind of start to let go. So they took me to the like supermarket to get a couple of clothes that actually ended up being maternity clothes because I was like larger in size and stature than some of the people in country. And so we got these like very bizarre mix of clothes, some of which I still have just because it's funny that I have them. And anyway, we get the clothes put together. The experience as we went was very moving. I felt open right away, I think because of the freedom of like, when you don't have when the plans go awry, you just have to kind of go with it, right? So we're touring a lot of the different Rupe trips that are service and immersion, and there was a lot of education combined with this experience. We learned a lot about El Salvador, the Civil War, the Jesuits that were killed and their companions, the church women. We did a homestay. And the most impactful day that kind of really leads to this sense of blessedness was we went to the cripta where Monsignor Romero is buried. And we visited his tomb, and we had Mass there. And it was the most lively Mass I had ever been to. People were clapping and cheering and yelling, and it felt like everyone from the Bible was there. Like, oddly enough, I was like, there's Lazarus, the beggar, and there's like Mary, and so the woman with the demon, and all kinds of stuff. Because people were so open and so kind of humble and really vulnerable before God. There were people with no shoes and broken shoes and literally asking for money right there while we're in the church. People rushing up to communion. It was amazing, witness to faith. And it was like an experience of Mass I had ever seen. We go up that day to the higher level of the church. So that was in the basement. We went up to the higher level. And that was a church I had seen before. So already I'm kind of like wrestling with what is church. It was kind of like orderly, people sitting together in lines and pews and gold tabernacle and kind of like, it looked like a church that I had been raised in. It looked like home to me. But it felt like there was something missing, something that the downstairs level had that I didn't have or that we didn't have. We went that afternoon to the community of Santa Cecilia, and we were just intended to spend time with them and play games and icebreakers. And they immediately welcome us as our brothers and sisters from BC, hermanos y hermanas. I'm like, wow, brothers and sisters, that's special. And we play these games where they have us like do icebreakers, where we're like, put your cheek next to the cheek and put your hand next to each other's hand, and it's all in Spanish. So we're trying to just kind of like go with it. And but they were trying to show us like our shared humanity. That afternoon, we're walking through the streets of that same community, and they show us their homes, which were dirt floors and tin roofs and no running water and things like that. And I'm trying my best with this young girl, Karina, to say, hello, my name is Margaret. Hola, mi nombre es Margarita. What type of ice cream do you like? Like any words I had ever learned in Spanish class, I was like digging out to try to form a relationship. And by the end of the afternoon, they're telling me, we love you, come back, stay, we love you, we love you, we love you. And they're using the word like quiero, which is a different kind of love in Spanish in Latin America, which means like, I want you and I care for you and I love you in this like agapic sort of way. And that blew my mind. I thought, why? Why did I deserve this love? Like, really? You love me? I'm giving you nothing. I'm just here. And that day, we got on the bus. Dan Ponsetto was the leader on that trip. He told us we had to leave because it was no longer safe for us to stay, and we had to go home and eat dinner. And I got on the bus that day, and I was ripped out of there like a Band-Aid from a wound that like you just put the Band-Aid on. And I broke to pieces on that bus. I broke down crying, I was shaking, I was trembling, I was just bawling. And I remember it was kind of like one of these Armageddon moments where like your whole life flashes before your eyes in like 10 seconds and you see all your loved ones at once and church and God and like everything that I ever known in like a second. And Dan Ponsetto looked at me and he said, what are you gonna do? He said, how are you gonna live your life? How does this change you? And I had no idea. I was completely lost. But I felt loved. I felt an unconditional love that was beyond anything I had ever felt. I felt like God was there in the poor, in that community, in Dan, in my community, in my church at St. Peter's, in every place I'd ever been, but in a very prominent way, right then and there, that was church. And why? I think because I felt that blessedness and the brokenness kind of all in one. I knew I couldn't fix El Salvador. I knew I couldn't fix myself. I knew I couldn't fix my ability to really do anything. But I felt the blessedness. One of my favorite words in English and Spanish is companionship. Companions, in Spanish it's compañerismo, compañeros, compañeras, they say. And it comes from the Latin, it breaks down com panes, which is with bread. And that's sharing a meal. That's breaking bread. That's that Eucharist. Jesus took the bread and he broke it. It's sharing a meal like you do here in Hillside with chips and a pickle. And it's a very real way that we go through life together, is sharing a meal and sharing our real selves with each other. And there's this liberation theologian, Gustavo Gutierrez, who talks about the Last Supper specifically. And he talks about in the Last Supper, there's two memories. There's dos memorias. And he says that there's that moment of the breaking of the bread, right, and the last that actual meal. He says that's one memory, and that's the contemplative element of that point. And then he said there's a second memory when Jesus said, do this in memory of me. And that's the washing of the feet, when we're called to serve others. So that do what, which I learned over the summer by Gustavo himself, incredible experience, that do what has suddenly become an incredible call to serve others with my gifts and talents. I'm going to flash forward a little bit to coming back from that trip in El Salvador. I came back, I had this kind of sense of faith, this sense of kind of what to do next. I know you're here because of NBC on the thing. You want to know what did my life have to do with NBC? This is the part. So my junior year, I come back. I'm trying to figure out what to do with this Agape experience. And I had 2 internships lined up, one with NBC and one with Hill Holliday, an advertising firm here in Boston. And but I was completely perplexed by this idea of faith and this call to serve and this call to respond. I knew that the junior year internship was really important. I knew that what you did that summer was really defining. And I had an important conversation with one of my mentors that helped me start to think about vocation in a new way. I had come back from the Agape trip actually wanting to be a nurse, which, spoiler alert, did not happen, obviously. I work here. Never been a nurse. But that mentor kind of sat me down. He talked about vocation and advocation, that vocation is a call of who we are, and advocation is kind of like what we do with who we are, how we spend our time. There was an opportunity to go abroad again for the summer for 1 month to El Salvador, which would mean not doing those internships. And that kind of call, that vocation, as I was working out with that mentor, was helping me figure out that I really want to be a person who loves deeply, who loves vulnerably, who shares oneself with others, not for selfish reasons, but who really cares for and takes care of other people. And for some reason, those internships just kind of weren't matching up with that vocation for me. So the advocation and that opportunity to go back to El Salvador for a month with the Casa de la Solidaridad, a program that's in a couple of different countries now, was kind of clear to that advocation and the vocation. My parents wanted me very much to do the internships. What parent wouldn't? They were concerned about where my BC education would go. Would 1 week lead to 1 month, lead to a lifetime in one of these countries? And they had invested a ton of time and money into my ability to be here. So I think they were really concerned with kind of what next, right? Where was this going to go if she turned these down? We had some pretty difficult conversations. Ultimately, the feeling of blessedness, that kind of understanding that if God's got my back, if my parents underlyingly, if I know deeply that they love me no matter what, and faith is kind of what this is about, then I have to follow it. So I made the decision to go to El Salvador, to not do those internships, and to kind of risk everything, to kind of go into this unknown. When I'd come into BC, I had seen myself like going into marketing, or to be the CEO of something, to be a big donor that has her face profiled like in the BC Alumni magazine. Maybe that'll happen someday, but the donor part, I don't know. But I mean, anyway. So kind of moving a little bit more to the brokenness. The blessedness is what propels us to be okay in the brokenness. The brokenness is that feeling when we're broken in half, when we're missing another part, right? It's halved. Something of us is not completely whole. The experience of El Salvador did propel me to go and live in Nicaragua for 2 years, which was more of kind of, I think, what my parents feared. And living in Nicaragua was an incredible experience. That's an Agape Latte for another night. But I lived with 5 other US volunteers. We lived in community, in faith, in simple living. We volunteered in low-income neighborhoods of Managua, Nicaragua. And I was in love with it in every sense. But I feel like I lived brokenness for 2 years. I watched people live of poverty. I watched people die of poverty. We watched kind of everything that I think a person can experience in 2 years and tried our best to figure out how to live and love in service in that lifestyle. And when I came back from that experience in the US, I was 24 and completely lost. If you think you don't know what to do after graduation now, go to JVC and then really find yourself in a black hole, because I was completely confused. People were so excited to welcome me back after 2 years. I was Margaret back after 2 years of like, my brother thought I had been Mother Teresa for 2 years, which I was not. But I felt like a part of me had completely changed and no one could really understand that. I felt this drive to live in solidarity, to work at the lowest level of society. Like Dean Brackley is a Jesuit. He talks about downward mobility, that in order to fight the systems of injustice, we have to move ourselves down. And all I wanted to do was go down and down and down and down. And I felt like society just kept bringing me up and up and up. How to fight that, how to live in solidarity. I was thinking about how after I got back, people wanted me to tell the story. What was Nicaragua like? And I was invited to churches to speak, and women's groups, and all kinds of faith-sharing groups. And my high school even invited me to give the commencement talk that year. And I remember that, like, as an act of solidarity, to prove how much I don't care about these things, I'm not gonna do my hair. And so I didn't brush it, I didn't blow dry it, I showered and let it air dry. And that didn't go over super well with some of my friends and family members that day, but I gave the talk and I, had my solidarity pride inside. But so there was this quest to kind of like stay with the people, to stay with the memory of what I had experienced, to stay in service. I got a job with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which was what I had done in Nicaragua. And I was given the opportunity to travel all over the world, to Chile, Micronesia, Peru, you name it, I was there. I often wrote in my journal, like on these airplanes, when I was 25, I traveled the world. That's gonna be the first line of my book, if I ever write a book. And then I'll donate lots of money. So I'm traveling the world, and I still have this feeling of feeling like I wish I had been in Nicaragua. I had the chance to go back to Nicaragua through my work with JVC, and I was thrilled. I couldn't wait. I had already plans of like not getting back on the plane so that I didn't have to come back to the United States. And I was with the volunteers there, supporting them in their experience. My job was to run retreats there, which was like a perfect combination of everything I'd done. It really felt like a dream job at the time. But I couldn't fight that emptiness, that brokenness of missing what I had loved so much in another country. So I'm in Nicaragua. I remember like calling the guy, the Jesuit who had been my spiritual director there. I was only there for like 10 days, and I'm like, I have to see you. It is an emergency. I'm going through a lot. I'm completely empty. And he was busy kind of with his thing, and I wasn't like his person anymore, I was gone. But he got me in like the very end of my time there. And I was kind of telling him how I felt, a puddle of tears, completely broken, completely like, should I stay here forever? I feel like this is what Jesus says I should do. And he gave me this painting the next day. I wish I'd brought it. It's like a little kind of image. It's like a silhouette of Jesus. And on the back he wrote, Margarita te acompaño, acompáñame. And that in Spanish translates to, Margaret, I accompany you, accompany me. Companionship, that compound with bread. And at that moment, I was struck with my call was no longer to accompany in Nicaragua. My call was now to accompany the volunteers in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. As much as I was trying to fight it, as much as that brokenness wanted me to like force a wholeness, I had to remember the blessedness. Where was that other part, right? Well, that part was with God. That part is in community. that part is with my family and with being back in the United States and trying to rebuild a life after having been in Nicaragua. So that was kind of a reminder to me that in the brokenness, we have to go back to the blessedness. We have to go back to that bread and what's real and true. Finally, the last piece is the sharedness. Let me take some water too. Do I sound dry? I feel dry. All right. The shared part, I'm going to fast forward 3 years. I still work for the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. Life is awesome. I live in Washington, D.C. I have this great sort of hippie commune of friends who are all into social justice and faith and sharing resources. And we live in a house with 3 people who all have done volunteer work. And there's a house down the street with people who have all done volunteer work. And we play Settlers of Catan on Fridays. And we don't drink that much except sometimes. And it's wonderful. It's like I worked at the Catholic Worker, which is something very dear to my heart. I was vigiling once a week, if not twice a week, down at the White House, protesting wars and prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, or our presence having prisoners in Guantanamo Bay. And life is like the best it could be, right? I'm living this this post-JV life, this dream of ongoing solidarity in like a post-JV world. And the only problem was the job was getting tiring. I was traveling all over the world, like weeks at a time, like George Clooney up in the air, racking up millions of miles. I liked it, but I was no longer feeling challenged. I was no longer feeling on fire with what I was doing. I wanted to grow professionally. I wanted to make a little bit more money. Friends of mine were starting to get married and have babies. And I remember one of my BC roommates called me up and told me she was in love, and I was like, shoot, I gotta get on it. Got on OkCupid that night. And, you know, I just felt like, shoot, what if I had taken a wrong turn? I'm sort of like falling behind. I'm kind of stagnant in this world, and I need to grow again. Like it's time to move on. And I was sitting in Chile in an internet cafe on a site visit to the volunteers there. And I got an email from good friend, mentor, former boss, current colleague, Mike Sacco. And he wrote that there was a job opening in the Center for Student Formation to help students discern their gifts and talents to serve others in the world, to run halftime and to work in mission and ministry, which was this new division that was combining all the offices from campus that I absolutely loved into one awesome division. And that if there was a desire in my heart to come back to higher ed, or to come back to Boston College, that there was a job that I could consider. And it was like one of those moments where you know how you like pray for the coconut to fall and hit you on the head so that it's clear, bam, obvious? So the coconut falls on my lap. It doesn't hit me in the head, but so the opportunity is there, like super clear. But it didn't hit me here yet. I wrestled again with like, this is upward mobility. I'm gonna make more money, a little bit more money. And I'm gonna be at a place of privilege. Boston College with all the, you know, the prestige and the allure and the beautiful buildings and the incredible sidewalks. And I'm really grateful for the sidewalks now because I had to walk to campus today. But, you know, this place of prestige, would I still be blessed? Would I still be broken? Would I still be able to live in the service of others? The funny part about this was that I hadn't looked at higher ed. I hadn't kind of specifically wanted to come back to BC. When I had come back from Nicaragua, my sister was here on campus, and I like squatted with her a couple weeks in Walsh when I was so lost and didn't know what to do. I was like, the comfort of being at BC and being able to talk to mentors here, but everything was wrong about BC at that time. Like I was kind of like, you know, repelling what BC was. But at this point, at this stage, BC became attractive again and reminded me of so much of what I had loved and where I had grown. And I was kind of hit with this reality that I wanted to give back. I wanted to be what others were for me. Had mentors here not been here for me, I don't know where I wouldn't have been in JVC in the first place. I wouldn't have been working at the Catholic Worker in the first place. So this idea of sharedness started coming to me, that I wanted to, again, try to live life in service of others. Here I am, trying to be shared. And I think the point, I hope, is the takeaway, is that we're all called to be shared. We're all called to give of our gifts and talents in the service of others, and our passions, what we deeply desire. Jesus, God, our faith is accompanying us at every stage of the journey, and we're accompanying each other as long as we're participating in that sharing of the meal, in that breaking of the bread. Dorothy Day is my absolute favorite, one of my absolute favorite people. And in her book, The Long Loneliness, at the very end, she talks about the development of the Catholic worker and how it wasn't clear how it was evolving over time. And I very much feel like that's true for my own story. Like, when I look back, I'm like, wow, there was this moment, and that moment, and that moment. But it wasn't like that. She says at the very end, she says, it all happened while we sat there talking, and it is still going on. And it all happened while I was sitting there talking. And as I'm sitting here talking with you now, you're like, shut up, get off the stage. But it happens in the conversations, and it happens in the honesty, and it happens in the blessedness, and it happens in the brokenness. If we're paying attention to it, if we're aware of it, and if we're open to it. All of these things, all of these kind of experiences came with very kind of careful prayer and attention, those 3 B's, be attentive, be reflective, be loving, with mentors, with friends, with my family, with my faith. And they didn't kind of just show up overnight. So I hope that's some consolation to you. And I think as I go forward, and I don't know kind of I don't know the next turn in that sweet convertible, where I'll end up. Well, I feel like I have another dream job here at BC, running a program that really shaped my life, I think, for the better. Want to get married. I want to have kids. I might move to Nicaragua again someday, maybe, if all those things work out. You know, who knows? I don't know where I'll be. But I think for me, the key message is to really just pay attention to those feelings of blessedness, brokenness, and shared, and that call, the do this in memory of me, to always be asking that do what. So thank you for being here with me in this memory. I hope we can continue to ask this do what together. That's all.